So moving on to an interesting one, a lot of work has been done to federate these services with mixed success. Facebook and other social networks have a number of open source implementations out there. Let's start with Barry. How would you approach that problem?
Okay, so in the case of Facebook, it's kind of, so there's a few different ways of looking at it. You can look at it in the sense of, you're storing some information in a blockchain that you're sharing with particular other people. So some of the things that we mentioned earlier on about webmail apply. So there would be overlap with that and other ways of doing messaging. However, I think the biggest problem, the biggest thing to think about is how do you control what people do with that information? So while I can, put some information on, de-Facebook or decentralized Facebook, I can encrypt that and allow only certain people to access it, but because it's decentralized, the people who have access to it may not be using the same client as I am. So I have no guarantee about how they're going to use the data that I sent them. And for instance, something like a Facebook survey, and in the case of Cambridge Analytica, they sent out a survey. Some people looked at that survey and said yes, but the requirements on that saying yes said that not only would you share your data with Cambridge Analytica, you would also share the data of your friends. So the problem is there, even if you're the best person, if you're a friend with someone who's not, they can really screw over your data. So preventing that in the case of a decentralized Facebook is probably the hardest problem.
We'll just, we have a couple more really exciting services we want to get through, so Russell.
Okay, so that's the hardest problem. Perhaps there's some ways to work with it, but I don't have like a solid solution, but I have some like potential stuff, but it's the most interesting problem.
Russell.
Yeah, I think to follow on that, because there will be lots of different clients, so you'll have to start with identity standards, and those will grow, I guess, into something like social sharing standards of some sort. And again, all the data issues that we were kind of alluding to earlier. If I wanted to recreate Facebook decentralized, I might do certain things, but we probably don't want to do that. So I would just say my newsfeed algorithm is a horrible little thing that wants me to just click on meaningless drivel, and I'd like an AI that's going to give me the things that I really should be watching, like, I don't know, one of you guys' last talks at wherever you work, because I'm sure that would be more worthwhile than like than the cat on the treadmill, but maybe not, I don't know.
But it definitely says why you would want that,
yeah.
as opposed to what we currently have.
Yeah.
Right. Ben, how are you going to solve Russell's newsfeed problem?
Well, the newsfeed problem, that's actually not necessarily the hardest of these problems. What I immediately thought of when we thought about decentralizing Facebook, like I played a while ago with RocksDB, which is a distributed graph database that Facebook had open sourced from some of their internal work, and it wasn't quite right for what we needed to do. So one of the things we're doing, like deep in the tech guts of our Singularity network, we're taking the weighted labeled hypergraph knowledge store from OpenCog, and we're working out how to make that massively distributed and decentralized. So you have a sort of a decentralized network of distributed subnetworks, which is like a distributed hypergraph database. And I think if you get this sort of massively decentralized graph database, which has a lot of subtleties to it, like when do you replicate nodes of the graph? You have a node here linking to another node over there that might go away, but if we solve those problems, making the plumbing for decentralized graph databases, I think that gives a nice framework in which to do the more specialized work to build something like a decentralized Facebook. But there's a lot of problems both at the decentralized graph database layer and at the layer above it, more than we could do in the next 11 minutes.
I think so. Jason?
The thing I would add, I guess, is separating out some of the biggest features of it. So there's like the interconnectedness with your friends and people like that. These are some of the problems you guys have been talking about. But then there's also the value of being able to store your pictures and save all that stuff, and basically pulling that power back from the centralized thing. So using things like IPFS maybe there. For the identity layer, maybe things like Blockstack or some of the related decentralized identity schemes. The other part, I guess, to sort of prevent the newsfeed stuff might be incentivization in some of these models. So preventing people from spamming news feeds full of crap by attaching some value to it. There's been some projects that are out there that are doing some of this stuff. I think Steemit's one of them that I've seen that's trying this. So there's quite a few that are trying. I think there's some good ideas in those.
Yeah, this is one of the things we've been looking at doing in the DIA, in this Decentralized AI Alliance, is sort of reputation and rating management using machine learning and natural language processing. Seems like a utility that many, many different blockchain-based projects should use, and perhaps as a commons that could be contributed to collaboratively within an industry organization.
So speaking of incentives, our last two are very economically centered and have some interesting game theoretical challenges. So very briefly, Uber, peer-to-peer ride sharing or fully decentralized ride sharing. What might that look like? Russell?
Yeah, so there are multiple different actors in, let's say, a ride-sharing workflow. So it would be some sort of decentralized exchange with multiple process steps with various actors being encoded in the system and being able to engage in various transactions. So, you'd probably want some sort of attestation kind of thing for drivers. You'd want the ability for verified drivers to pick up people who put a request in there, and so on and so forth.
Ben?
I think there's always a lot of aspects to these things, but one aspect that would be interesting as part of a decentralized ride-sharing system would be the ability for users and providers to sort of collaboratively figure out more interesting types of metadata and interesting types of multidimensional rating to use. Like maybe sometimes, I would find it interesting to get to ride with someone who wanted to talk to me about their local area. And sometimes I want to ride with someone who will just shut the fuck up and let me play with my phone while we drive, right? And it may depend on the mood I'm in. Right. And if you could actually look at that, well, this guy's really interesting. This guy is mute, so he won't try to talk to you, right? And so this sort of hacking onto the platform is something that would happen with a more open, decentralized platform where people could contribute to what dimensions drivers and riders are rated in, and then different dimensions of rating could be rated as to how useful they are to people. This sort of creativity just doesn't happen when you have a centralized system where everything's driven just by how much revenue can the centralized company make.
Jason?
I think one of the most interesting technical challenges with this one is trying to apply it to the developing world where not everybody would have an internet connection. A lot of the decentralized and blockchain types of solutions pretty much depend on you being always connected all the time. So coming up with ways where you can still have that exchange of value after the driver has driven you out into the middle of nowhere where there might not be a cell network or there may not be any way to access the information. How can you be sure that the money you're getting is actually legit from the other person?
If you could make it work through feature phones, that would go a long way, though, right? Like in Ethiopia, where we have a big AI office, almost everyone has a phone, but they don't all have smartphones because the internet's so expensive.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I guess there's a lot of levels of assumptions one could make.
Barry?
Okay, so because we're talking about peer-to-peer and the latency has to be really low, no one wants to wait 10 minutes for a match to be confirmed on a blockchain like Bitcoin and then have to wait another 10 minutes for the driver to get back to you, and because they were already 10 minutes away by the time that they started. So it needs to be much faster than that. So something that is a bit more akin to, say, the Lightning Network instead, where you have peer-to-peer transactions going through a route. and then stuff being confirmed onto the blockchain later on. Something like that seems to be like the beginning point. To add to your point, Ben, open matchmaking, so being able to have some rules about who you want to be matched up with. You may not get the best person, and maybe you're willing to wait a bit longer to get someone who you can talk to, or maybe you say, well, I just got to leave now, so I'll take anyone, even if they have a lower rating. I'll take it, I just need to get there now. So the ability to change the algorithm for matching based off of your preferences, taking into account the driver's preferences as well, makes a lot of sense. But also, adding to your point as well, this is not going to be just in North America, it's not going to be just Canada or the US, it's going to be everywhere. So there are more difficult questions about the less solid things about something like this, like how would this be different in India versus North America? Will people be paid the same in both places or not? Will the decentralized version actually be aware of different laws or what have you?
So we just